While watching a movie based on a historical subject you're familiar with, at some point, you've probably found yourself saying something along the lines of, "Wait a minute, that's not how it went," or "I'm pretty sure they made that up." Historical revisionism is common in films. More than an anachronism, it's when known or recorded facts are intentionally altered and presented as part of the story. When a piece of media is based on a real event or biopic, it's done so in order to focus the narrative, in order to compress storylines or limit the number of characters. Moreover, we have films that are described as period pieces, but the characters exhibit our modern way of dressing, or talking, or are way more inclusive than what would have been the norm in the date the film is set in. When well executed, it can be a new or refreshing take on a known story, but when it isn't, well, it might come off as pandering or superficial. And of course, there are those who push the historical inaccuracies to a point where it becomes an alternate history. Quentin Tarantino's last 4 entries to his filmography fit within the revisionist category. Django Unchained and The Hateful Eight can even be classified as revisionist westerns. But for the purpose of today's video, we will be looking at the 2 films that deal with real-life events and whose endings veer into an alternate history. Inglourious Basterds is set during the Second World War in Nazi-occupied France. Although there are a couple of storylines, in essence, the film is about a group of Jewish American soldiers that are hunting Nazis. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is set at the end of the 1960s in LA, and we follow actor Rick Dalton and his stunt double Cliff Booth as they deal with the decline of their respective careers. We will be analyzing how Quentin Tarantino approaches revisionism in his films, and what drives him to make an ending that is at odds with reality. If you haven't watched either of the films, please be warned that we will be discussing spoilers. And this video is kindly sponsored by Surfshark, but more on that midway.
It's official, old buddy. Well, has been.
What are you talking about? What did that guy tell you?
Told me the goddamn truth is what he told me.
Whoa.
Even if Quentin Tarantino is known to take liberties with reality, he actually tries to be respectful with the time period he is exploring. He never starts writing a story without having a good handle on the era, either by his own lived experience or by copious amounts of research. But there is a point where he prefers being authentic to a certain element of the historical context rather than being completely accurate. As he explains his thought process while making Django Unchained, he wanted to make a genre piece about black male empowerment. He felt that a lot of movies that try to be accurate to the time period, as he says, history with a capital H, kind of get in the way of themselves and miss the opportunity to explore something important about the specific point in history. He doesn't just use the setting as a cinematic backdrop. He makes sure to use the natural conflicts that inhabit these realities as the main obstacles his characters have to overcome. In Inglourious Basterds, it's about the importance of language for survival during the Second World War. Tarantino always felt that a lot of war movies might have been historically accurate, but inauthentic out of convenience of having all the characters speak the same language, overlooking an important aspect of that specific reality.
So you have a situation that if you can pull off the lingo, if you can pull off the language, you could survive in an enemy territory. You could infiltrate a different army, whether it be Germans infiltrating Americans or Germans infiltrating the Czech resistance or people infiltrating the Germans. All right, that was a possibility because of that situation, but it depended solely on language. But even just survival. People's life in Europe at that time, you could live or die by them understanding German.
That's why in his movie, the French characters speak French, the Germans speak German, and so forth. There's no clunky attempt at having people speak English with an odd regionalized accent. It makes the setting of World War II Europe feel all the more tangible, and at the same time, is one of the main drivers of the already established tension. Tension that can be felt in the masterful first scene where Shoshana's family is hiding under the floorboards, and Hans Landa's language shift is what fails to alert them of their impending doom. Or in the suspenseful tavern scene where the accent of the infiltrating UK soldier is what first sets off an alarm in the German major, and his unfamiliar hand gesture is what ultimately gives them away. And towards the end, while infiltrating the packed premiere for Operation Kino, the only reason the bastards continue with the mission is because the Germans don't have an ear for Italian. Except for Landa. Language becomes a cover, a way to hide in plain sight, respecting a historical reality. The world of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is also based on a reality, but from a more personal point of view on Tarantino's behalf. LA is dressed to look like it was back in the late 60s. The restaurants, the storefronts, the cars, even the music coming from the radio, all recreated to recall Tarantino's memories of his childhood. He brings us into a world that is slowly moving on from the golden age of Hollywood. This is represented in the obstacles the main character Rick Dalton is trying to overcome in his waning career. The anxiety that Rick is facing is essentially tied to the era. He is part of that very first generation in the 50s that became a leading man, a star on a popular TV show, and there was a possibility of him becoming a movie star. There was him and guys like him that did the movies but weren't able to completely pull off the transition. Each character shows a different level of the changing reality. Cliff being someone who spent most of his life working in the industry but with not much to show for it. Rick's neighbors, Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate, representing the new era that has just started to ascend. And Rick, that was once very successful, is now coming to terms with the reality that his dream might be over. In these two movies, we see that before Quentin Tarantino does any drastic change, the story and the characters have to be rooted in an aspect of reality, so that once we divert from history, we feel like it's still holding on to a certain level of credibility. Not just the setting, but the character's core conflict. Now, moving on to a different type of conflict. Like when you're trying to keep your online identity hidden, well, you might be interested in getting a VPN, like the one we use from Surfshark. Not only does it give you access to a lot of content from streaming services that would otherwise remain geolocked in other countries, but most importantly, it protects your information by encrypting all the data that you send through the internet and where you are connecting from, keeping unwanted prying eyes away. And adding to that peace of mind, even they don't log your information. There are a lot of VPNs out there, but we prefer using Surfshark because it's one of the fastest, well-reviewed, most affordable, and offers a slew of features. Not only does it work across all platforms, but you're not limited to the number of devices you can install it on. Use Surfshark Alert that lets you know if your information appears in a leaked database, or Surfshark Search to prevent ads or trackers to follow your searches. I could go on, but I recommend you look it up on your own. Go to surfshark.deals/screened. If you use our promo code SCREENED, you will get 83% off the regular price, which means that for something like a couple bucks a month, you can be fully protected. Plus, you'll get 3 months for free. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you try it and you don't like it, you can simply cancel your subscription and get your money back. And now, we return to the show.
But in the pages of history, every once in a while, fate reaches out and extends its hand. What shall the history books read?
The use of Once Upon a Time in the beginning of Inglourious Basterds, and as the title of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, should clue us in on two things. Number one is that this is first and foremost a story. Regardless of how close it could ever be to history, it would still end up as a fantasy. And number two, this story will follow a literary narrative. After Tarantino introduces the reality the characters inhabit, he then lets them take over the direction of the story. As a writer, as you're going along your story path, you have these different tunnels that the characters or your scenario can take. And most screenwriters will put roadblocks in front of some of those tunnels because they can't afford to go down them. I've always said I don't have any roadblocks, I just go wherever the characters go. Tarantino opts for a literary structure that allows him to indulge in his storytelling intuition, like what we would find in a novel. This more flexible narrative can be seen in how he embeds a story within a story, like in Inglourious Basterds when the German soldier is telling Hitler about his encounter with the bastards. And then in that story, we see Lieutenant Aldo Raines recalling how they enlisted Sergeant Stiglitz in their group. Or in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, when Cliff is remembering why he's not allowed on set. And then in that memory, we get another flashback as to how Cliff killed his wife on a boat. A multiple layered memory. Later in the movie, you can also notice that the way the show Rick Dalton is working on is shot the same as the rest of the film, making both realities indistinguishable. So you can gather that if structure is not a roadblock for the story or the characters, then neither is our shared historical reality, as is demonstrated in Tarantino's two most glaring acts of revisionism. In both movies, we expect history to run its course. The bastards are going to fail, and the members of the Manson family will reach Cielo Drive and murder Sharon Tate, her unborn child, and her friends. But here the fictional elements override the established realism in an explosive manner and lead us into an alternate reality. Inside the movie theater, the combination of Shoshana and the Bastards' plan goes into motion. The attendees, their guests, and German high command are trapped and slaughtered. Hitler's face is almost torn off from the close-range barrage of bullets he received. Tarantino didn't want to do a fake-out, where it turned out that it was just a double, or that Hitler escapes. He makes us watch, and doesn't allow for doubt. Hitler and his acolytes are killed. One could say that the bastards have succeeded in bastardizing history. When Manson's followers arrive at Rick's house, similarly to the Nazis, they are met with an over-the-top, stylized, and almost cartoonish level of viciousness. The mauling, the bone-breaking hits, the screaming while running through glass, all ending with Rick using a flamethrower to finish off the last intruder, which in itself is a nod to Inglourious Basterds, since the weapon was used by Rick's character to kill Nazis. The aging stars stand their ground, cutting off the threat to Sharon and her friends. In both cases, we bear witness to what could be described as punishment. People behind acts of atrocity are snuffed out in an equally atrocious manner. But this is not a case of subversion for the sake of subversion. Tarantino views his decision to kill Hitler as just a natural progression of his story, and for someone that usually indulges on his impulses, this one is a historically cathartic one. As an audience, we are more than willing to see Hitler die twice, the more the better. So even if this is a bold decision, it's one that we can go along with. Now when it comes to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the decision was more personal, to save someone, or at least the memory of her, a cinematic mercy. I came up with that final image 5 or 4 years ago. It was very cathartic to have that in my head for so long, and to work it out and do it, and have it be exactly the way it was in my head, and to capture it on celluloid. Quentin Tarantino didn't want to focus on the horrific tragedy that befell Sharon Tate and her friends. He didn't want to keep remembering such a sweet, beloved, and beautiful person solely as a victim. He wanted to portray her alive and not like one of his characters, running errands, watching herself on the big screen, simply living. Tarantino wanted to give Sharon what was robbed from her. The two people whose futures are uncertain inadvertently intervene in granting a future to the one who had the most at stake, the most to lose. In the end, all three are granted an extension on life and allowed to simply exist, if only in Tarantino's imagination, a place where fantasy can win over reality. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video. Our next essay will be coming out in March and will be the start of our new screened film club. Make sure to stay notified to know what the month's movie theme will be. We invite you to like, share, and subscribe so this channel can keep growing and reaching more people. Today's music was made by Eduardo Gonzalez. If you like what you heard, check his information down in the description. Until next time.